I never expected her to remember my name, let alone everything else. The coffee shop smelled like burnt caramel and old books, same place I came to every Tuesday morning before class. The barista, a quiet woman in her mid-40s, always wore her silver hair pulled back tight, like she was ready to tackle whatever the day threw at her. I used to think of her just as the woman behind the counter, the one who called out orders without much more than a glance. But today, when she said, "Hey, Mark," the usual, something about the way her eyes flicked down to my hands, folding a napkin in some nervous ritual, made the corners of the world shift a little. It's dumb, really. The kind of small thing nobody notices or cares about. But I'd been coming here for almost a semester now, and she was the only person who ever made me feel less invisible. The only person who saw the crease in my jacket, the way I sometimes stared out the window, thinking about things I wouldn't say aloud. I nodded, a little too quickly. "Yeah, thanks." I watched her move behind the counter, the quiet rhythm of her hands, measuring, pouring, tapping the steam wand. It wasn't just the coffee she made, it was how she made it. Like it was more than a routine, like she was telling a story without words. I didn't want to mess it up, so I kept my voice low when I said, "How's your day?" She paused, like the question was something rare, almost strange. "Busy, but that's life, right?" There was a softness in her smile, almost tired but not quite. And then, out of nowhere, she added, "You're distracting me." I blinked, trying to decide if I'd heard that right. "Distracting?" I asked, heart picking up. She shrugged, looking away for a moment, then back with a glance that didn't quite meet mine. "Yeah, you with your quiet ways and those eyes that look like they're hiding something." There was a joke in there somewhere, but I wasn't sure I was ready for it. "Guess that makes two of us," I said, a little breathless, and suddenly the awkwardness wasn't so sharp anymore. She laughed softly, and it was like the whole shop got warmer. The silence between us stretched and folded into something I hadn't expected, a kind of unspoken invitation. That moment stayed with me long after I left the shop. Walking back to my apartment, I found my thoughts tangled in the way her words had landed, soft but certain, like they carried something real beneath the surface. At home, I caught myself staring at my phone. There were half-written texts I never sent, messages I rehearsed in my head 100 times. Nothing ever felt quite right to send, though. Maybe it was fear, or maybe just the weight of knowing some things were better left unsaid. The next day in class, I sat a little straighter, my mind circling back to her. The way she looked when she thought no one was watching, the quiet way she moved around the shop, like she belonged there, but also somewhere else. When I raised my hand to ask a question, something about the reading she assigned, her eyes locked with mine just a second too long. Then, in a voice quieter than I expected, she said, "Mark, you're distracting me." I swallowed hard, feeling a sudden heat spread across my cheeks. "Maybe," I said, "that makes two of us." She didn't answer, just gave a small, almost secret smile, and went back to her notes. I wanted to say more, to break the quiet, but I held back. Instead, I noticed her hands, calm, steady, but maybe just a little bit restless. After class, I found her by the door, gathering her things. The air was thick with words unsaid. She looked up, eyes catching mine, and for a moment, the noise of the hallway seemed to fade. "See you Tuesday?" I said, voice barely above a whisper. She hesitated, then nodded. "See you Tuesday." As I walked away, my phone buzzed with a new message. I didn't recognize the number at first. "Coffee tomorrow? I'll try not to distract you too much." I stopped, breath caught somewhere between hope and uncertainty. Maybe this was the start of something I didn't quite know how to say yet. I showed up the next morning, heart thumping a little faster than usual. The coffee shop smelled the same, bitter steam, the faint scent of cinnamon, and she was there, wiping down the counter, her silver hair catching the light like it held stories she never told. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. She looked up, a small smile tugging at her lips. "You made it. We ordered tea this time." She liked it strong, dark, and simple. I went for the green, the kind that smelled faintly of the sea. As we settled at a corner table, the shop's usual buzz dimmed around us. I watched her stir her cup, the way her fingers lingered on the handle like it was a lifeline. "I used to come here with my daughter," she said suddenly, eyes fixed on the tea swirling in her cup. Before she moved away. It wasn't much, but it was the first crack in the wall. The way she said "daughter" with a soft catch made me think she carried a weight, maybe one she wasn't quite ready to set down. I nodded, unsure what to say. She glanced up, catching my hesitation. "She's about your age," she added, almost like an apology. My stomach tightened, not because I minded, but because the age gap suddenly felt less abstract, more like a fragile thread stretched thin. For a moment, silence settled between us. Not uncomfortable, but heavy, like both of us were holding back something bigger. "I never had a real plan," I admitted quietly. "Just drifting through classes, trying to figure out what sticks." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Sometimes life doesn't wait for the plan. I caught myself imagining her, how it would feel to cross that line, to be more than a barista or a landlady. The thought was thrilling but dangerous, like standing too close to a fire. I looked away, focusing on the chipped edge of the table. "I don't usually sit with people," I said, "but this feels different." Her gaze softened, and she reached across, briefly brushing my hand as she passed the sugar. The touch was light, almost accidental, but it sent a ripple through me. "Careful," she said, half joking. "You might distract me again." I laughed quietly, and the tension broke just enough. That day, I left the shop with a head full of questions and a heart quietly tangled. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. She didn't show up the next morning. I sat at our usual table, the green tea cooling fast, untouched. The chair across from me felt empty in a way I hadn't expected. I caught myself watching the door too many times, like waiting for a ghost to walk in. When she finally appeared, it was late, more hurried than usual, and her smile was smaller, less certain. She set down a stack of menus, fingers trembling just a little as she arranged them. "Busy day," she said, but her eyes were elsewhere. I wanted to reach out, say something, anything, but the word stuck. Instead, I folded the corner of a napkin over and over, like that could steady me. A customer walked in, an old man who looked like he belonged in a different century. She slipped behind the counter without a glance, and I was left holding the silence. Later, when she came back to the table, she leaned in, voice low. "Mark, I don't know what you want from me." The question wasn't a shock. I'd wondered it myself, but it felt like a wall closing in. I swallowed hard. "I don't know either." She looked down, fiddling with her teacup, then up at me with a glance so quick I almost missed it, something raw and searching. Our hands brushed. I wanted to say more, to reach out. But then she pulled back, standing abruptly, the tension folding tight between us. At the door, I caught the scent of her perfume, a mix of jasmine and something old. And in that breath, I thought we might cross the line. Our eyes met, just for a moment, and then she was gone. I was left holding a half-remembered smile, a whisper of something almost said. We found ourselves outside the coffee shop just as the sun was dipping low, painting the sky a tired orange. I'd offered to walk her home. Something about the quiet felt necessary, like we both needed to step out of that cramped, humming space and into the stillness. Her steps were slow, measured, but there was a tightness in her shoulders I hadn't seen before. I wanted to ask what was wrong, but held back. Sometimes silence said more than words ever could. We paused at a bench near the park, the one with chipped paint and the faint scent of pine needles. She sat first, hands folded in her lap, fingers tracing the edge of her coat like she was chasing a memory. "Do you ever feel like you're just waiting?" Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. I looked at her, trying to read the meaning behind the words. Waiting for what? She hesitated, eyes dropping to the ground. For something to change. Or maybe for myself to change. I could feel it then, something breaking through the careful calm she always kept. "Is it hard?" I asked. "Every day," she said. Then, after a pause, almost as if daring herself to say it out loud, "I'm scared, Mark. Scared of what this is. Scared of losing control." I swallowed, my throat dry. "You don't have to be afraid." Her laugh was bitter, a dry sound that caught in the air between us. But I am. We sat side by side, the quiet growing heavy. I wanted to reach out, to take her hand, to tell her she wasn't alone, but something held me back. Then she looked up, eyes searching mine, vulnerable and unguarded. "Do you want this?" she asked, voice trembling just enough. The question hung between us, fragile and raw. I opened my mouth, but the words wouldn't come. And in that silence, everything waited. She stopped coming to the coffee shop. At first, I thought maybe she was just busy, life's usual swirl. But days turned into a week, and the chair across from me stayed stubbornly empty, the green tea growing cold, untouched. I tried calling once, twice. No answer. I left a message, careful not to sound desperate, but it sat unsent in my drafts, words tangled in hesitation. Then, one afternoon, I saw her across the street, talking quietly with a man whose hand rested lightly on her shoulder. They looked close, too close. Later, whispers drifted in the shop. Someone mentioned an ex, a child she rarely spoke about. Things I never asked, and she never told. I caught myself replaying every moment, every smile, every pause. Was I just a distraction? A momentary flicker she could easily forget? I stopped going to the shop. The routine unraveled, and with it, the quiet hope I'd been holding on to. Some nights, I'd stare at my phone, fingers hovering over the screen, too scared to reach out. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. The rain had started just as I reached her doorstep. I hesitated, the weight of everything we hadn't said pressing down like the cold drops on my jacket. She opened the door without a word, eyes searching mine. The quiet between us wasn't empty. It was full of all the small things we'd been holding back. Inside, the kitchen was warm, the faint smell of coffee lingering on the counter. She poured 2 cups, hands steady but careful, like she was balancing something fragile. I wanted to speak, to say all the things tangled in my chest, but the words tangled and slipped away. Instead, I watched her, the way her fingers traced the rim of her cup, the slight tremble in her breath. "Why did you stop coming?" I finally asked, voice low. She looked up, meeting my gaze without flinching. "Because I'm scared," she said. Pause. Scared that if I stay, I might break something I can't fix. The truth hung between us, heavy and raw. I nodded, understanding more than I could say. "I don't know what this is," I whispered, "but I don't want to lose it." She smiled, a small, honest curve of her lips that didn't try to be anything more. "Okay," she said softly. We sat in silence, the space between us settling into something real, fragile, and enough. Years later, the coffee shop had changed. New barista, new menu, but the bench by the park was still the same chipped blue, worn down just enough to feel familiar. We met there most mornings, usually around 8:47 a.m., cups in hand, her black coffee, bitter and sharp, me with the green tea I'd come to like. There were no grand declarations, no fireworks. Just quiet mornings filled with shared glances, small jokes about the cold weather, and the occasional comfortable silence that said more than words ever could. She still folded her napkins just so, and I still caught her watching the way my hands moved when I talked. The past, the mistakes, the fears, the missed texts, felt like distant shadows, softer now, softened by time and the slow work of knowing someone deeply. It wasn't perfect. It was real. And maybe that was enough. I don't know if anyone else would understand, but sometimes, when the world is quiet and the tea's just right, I catch that look she gives me, a simple glance that says, "You're still distracting me." And I think, maybe I'm okay with that.